Perfect. My name is Stan Baines, and I am a steering committee member of the Canadian Network for Imagination and Creativity, otherwise known to us as CNIC. My other partners in this endeavor are on your screen, so if you could all give us a wave just so everybody can see who we all are. Excellent. We look forward each month to these moments to be able to share with you deep discussions, ideas, and different ways of looking at how we do things, how we think, and how we can find creativity and imagination in every aspect of life. It isn't our purpose to find solutions or to solve problems, but more to look at things from a different aspects with different backgrounds, ask questions and have open forward-thinking dialogue, and come to a place of collaboration and partnership in our differences, in our beliefs, and in what we are all here to do, find creativity and expand our imaginations. So before I get too much further, I'd like to acknowledge that as a resident of Clarence Rockland, Ontario, which sits just outside of the east end of the city of Ottawa, I'm chairing our meeting on traditional unceded land of the Algonquin Anishinaabe territory. I'm very thankful and respectfully honored for this opportunity to be able to do so this evening. So for this evening's Idea Jam, we are going to be guided through our discussions by Ming-yu Lin. Ming-yu, give us a wave. There we go. Ming-yu is a music educator, a pianist, and is in the arts education program at Simon Fraser University. She is passionate about looking for the connection between the philosophy of improvisation and classical piano training, and aims to explore playful piano pedagogy for children. She has an excitement for creativity and will guide us this evening through her topic of, are you listening? As with all of our idea jams, we have several ways that you are able to participate in discussions afterwards. Zoom has built-in controls that allow you to raise your hand, so this way, if you want to speak, we can see you better. And you can add things in our chat, as I mentioned earlier. Don't feel obligated to speak, as sometimes listening and learning is just as engaging, but we do look forward to hearing your ideas. So with all that being said, Ming-yu, over to you.
Thank you, Stan. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Idea Jam today. I'm Ming-yu. Today, I'll invite you to open your ears, hear the sounds, listen to the sounds, and feel the sounds. I'll share some of my collections of sound and the sound clip I edit, and hopefully I could leave more than 30 minutes for you to share your thoughts and experiences of listening. First of all, I'll ask a question, and you can put your answers in the chat. The question is, what is your favorite sound? What is your favorite sound? Please share your answer in the chat. Cat-purring, laughter, running water, wow, waves from the ocean, sound of wind, wow, it's beautiful. Okay, so I'm so glad you will notice the sound in your lives and environment, and you enjoy the sound. And I hope this question makes you feel more connected to the sounds now. I often remind people to open their ears to notice the sound and listen. I often ask questions like, what did you hear from the sound? What are you listening when you are playing? Or how do you feel about the sound? How do you like the sound? Or the question you just answered, what is your favorite sound? And this is always my first question about sound. Listening should be a habit. You know, some people just ignore the sound. They know there are sounds everywhere, but they never listen to it. I hope to develop children's habits to notice the sound, feel curious about sound, and when they hear a sound, they're willing to listen and appreciate the sound. Where was it from? What does it mean? What can I hear in the sound? Is there any rhythm or musical elements in the sound? Is there anything special in the sound? Is there any information beyond the words or languages in the sound? Is there any connection between the sound and myself? I love the way that Pauline Oliveros explains listening. She says the ear hears, the brain listens, and the body senses vibrations. So for me, to hear is to notice, and to listen is to hear with a deeper perception. That is one of the ways we explore and join the world. We notice the sound and we perceive and interpret the sound. when you hear something, it's actually an invitation to listening. When we really want to hear something, we actually listen. And when we listen authentically, we may hear something that we never noticed. So listening is actually a very simple gesture, but it is one of the ways to encounter the beauty of this world. And I believe that is very important for creativity and imagination, and even for creating a reciprocal, careful community. Once I introduced a contemporary musical piece, Dripsody, to one of my students. How many of you know that piece? Dripsody from a Canadian composer, Hugh Lekayan. Anyone know? Okay, it's okay. I'll play the sound and I'll play the beginning part of that piece and you know what I'm talking about. Now I'm going to share the sound. One moment. Share the sound. Okay. Okay, so this is a musical piece called Dripsody, and the composer recorded the sound of a drip falling into a bucket or a big bowl, I think, and he edited the sound and re-recorded and put the sounds together to make this piece. And once I played this song from YouTube video to one of my students, and I explained the piece to my students, and she asked me, is that a real sound of a drip? How could a drip never have a pitch? You know, they are technology generation and they thought everything could be generated from a computer, right? So she didn't believe it's from a drip, a real sound. So I found a recording from my phone and showed her the sound like this. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Did you hear the different layers? Yeah, guess where I recorded this? After listening to this recording, my student asked me again, so what software do you use to edit the sound? To mix those different parts. I said, no, I didn't edit the sound at all. What you just heard was the original sound I recorded from my kitchen sink. I heard the sound after washing dishes and I put my phone close to the drain to record it. I didn't change anything about the sound and it just sounds like a band. It's interesting. I love collecting sound like this and showing my students how wonderful it is. While listening to the recordings, I always find it's very different from the sound in my knowledge or my memory, like I've never heard it. I'll share one more interesting one. Once my son and I were sitting by the dining table, we had just finished dinner and he accidentally hit the table while talking. And both of us noticed it made a strange vibrating sound from one of the empty plates. So we started to experiment and on the dining table, and we improvised with those empty dishes, and I recorded this. So this is our table percussion. Isn't it so curious? Sound is such a playful material. If we listen to the sound carefully from different angle, every sound is extraordinary. And if you listen carefully, the sound itself is creating a stage, telling a story, performing a show. Now playing one more sound clip. I would say it's a musical piece, but not just a musical piece. I made this sound clip. I mixed several sounds and languages in this piece. If you cannot recognize some of the languages, that's good. That is my intention. You will hear my improvisation on the piano. There are also some natural sound that I recorded from different places at different times. Some of my Ph.D. colleagues contribute their voices, and you hear. I also recorded one of our online meeting, so please listen to this piece and feel it. I call it "Can You Hear Me?"
Alexa, what is the definition of sound?
As a noun, sound is usually defined as the sensation produced by stimulation of the organs of hearing by vibrations transmitted through the air or other medium. As a verb, sound is usually defined as to make or emit a sound. For more, ask me to give you more definitions for sound.
Because language begins in silence and ends in silence, there is no language without silence.
Recognize people's voices like 40 years later.
My dissertation on space was actually a big part of that was timbre. What constitutes timbre? What is seductive about it?
Le roi est un collage d'expériences.
Not just the final tone, but all the many components of it that really, tunes me into something.
Call is a knock on the door. Corco. Corco twine.
And so for me, it seems like
Everything you have ever heard
you
has
talk
shaped
about
your
voice.
voice.
Voice is the one thing that we do have. It changes minorly by our manipulations. So while I understand, and I know
Music
in
is
my singing
language,
voice, I would love
and
to
language is
manipulate
music.
that ability to manipulate.
So you can still be understood, but you can still get it out so it sounds like you're sloppy, but you know what you're saying. So you can understand it anyway. But you bring it off hand the cheeks.
Corco.
Everything you've ever said has shaped someone else's voice.
I am completely enamored with voice. When I hear people's voices, it's just like a love affair. I have this relationship with voice in my life that I can't even describe to anybody.
你敢有听到我的声音？
It's always been. I've just always fallen in love with voice, and I can't help myself. It's just when I hear it, there's a particular. It's like oh my. And it's cultuurcontendre.
Say that again.
I used to be younger. Sharon, as soon as the border opens, go to Hollywood. We'll make 20 million a movie.
Le voix est un collage d'expériences.
你听到了吗？
You and all, and all and all.
They will know how funny is our discussion. Record this.
Beautiful. You'll get me in trouble. Corco twine. Corpo.
Namaste.
你敢有听到我的声音？
Kan je mij horen?
Basically means that you're telling you cannot even hear.
Cultuurcontendre. Cultuurcontendre.
你听到了吗？
Oh, can you hear me?
Kan je mij horen?
Okay. So this is the piece. I called it Can You Hear Me? Every sound in this piece means something to me or to the person who made it. Every sound has a story. There are several different languages in this piece: English, French, Taiwanese, Mandarin, Punjabi, and African. When we hear someone saying something we don't really understand, do we still listen? Can we hear anything beyond the language? Do we notice that each language has its own color and shape? Do we notice that each person has their own unique timbre, rhythm, tempo while speaking? And those features may be from her culture, her family, education, or some of her stories. Can we hear the emotion in the sound? Those different languages harmonized with piano music and natural sound. Those sound of ocean waves and sound of winds, I recorded all of those natural sound in Taiwan, my homeland. All of the sounds naturally weave together and become one. So I threw out many questions today. Before our discussion, I would like to invite you to listen again. I'll give us 2 minutes to listen to the environment. You can stay where you are, or I know many people like myself always try my best to create a vacuum environment for online meetings. So if you need, you can open the door or move to the hallway not too far from us. Of course, if you want to try, I will encourage you to try to listen in the quiet place, and you'll find maybe silence is not that silent as you thought. So please concentrate on listening to the environment. What can you hear? If you hear something, listen into the sound. What is that sound? Where is it from? Is the sound new or familiar? Does the sound have a tone or rhythm or any pattern? I'll call you back when the time is up. It's 2 minutes, and we can share what you hear in these 2 minutes. Please make sure you're muted. Okay, let's listen. Okay, time is up. I hope you all heard something. Now it's time to share your experiences and thoughts about listening and sounds. So let's open the discussion. Yes, Michael.
Ming-yu, I heard two very distinct sounds, and because I listened to them so carefully, I kind of created a soundscape of it in my mind. And please excuse the stolen term. We know who that is from, distinguished Canadian composer. But the two sounds I actually heard was my daughter's dog snoring, who's beneath me by the chair here, and played at a very low tone, but I could still hear it, was the CBC radio program. I think As It Happens is on at the moment. So I could hear human voices quite clearly, and I could hear the snoring of my daughter's dog. And as I listened more intensely, I seemed to find a rhythm between the two sound sources. Somehow the snoring seemed to punctuate the words, and the words seemed to put the snoring into some kind of time cadence, so that it all had a kind of beautifully mystical, musical sense to me. And it made me think that, sometimes if we change the conditions in which we perceive our reality, including listening rather than simply hearing, we see the inherent music of it all.
Michael, you have very good ears, and it just make your environment, musical.
Yeah,
You found
we can
it.
all do that. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you found it.
I believe Fred is next.
Well, I must admit, I might have missed a little in the preamble because I'm sitting there listening intently to my computer speakers, expecting a little bit of sound to come from there. And it didn't take long before there's a metronome in the background. Boy, my den clock is noisy. I didn't know it was that noisy. I don't have quiet environments around me. Normally the TV's on in the background. And then I picked up the fact that the airplanes were coming into the airport, which is just, 3 or 4 kilometers away from me. And I could hear the gentle approach of the planes. And then I started to listen to my tinnitus again. Whenever it's really quiet, that's what I hear.
I'll go next. I'm with Fred. So I heard the sound of my whirring computers, right? Because I've got several devices running here. But then I have a ticking clock on the wall. And what I was trying to do was drown out the sound of the ticking clock with the sound of the whirring computers. But what seemed to happen is that every single tick seemed to get louder. And it was almost to the point I was very thankful when you came back and said time's up, because I thought I'm going to go mad listening to that clock. But then as I'm operating, I don't notice that clock. In fact, I forget that it's there 9 times out of 10. But it's amazing when you're trying to find silence, what little noises can come in. And like I said, like by the time you came back, that ticking was so loud in my ear that I couldn't focus on anything else but that clock. Right. So that was very interesting.
So we only listened to the environment for 2 minutes and you feel it's super long, right?
Yeah, if they want to torture me, stick me in a room with a ticking clock, done. I'll give you anything.
Okay, anyone have a thought? Peter?
Yeah, so from what I can see, I'm the only one sitting outside, which is a stupid thing to do because it's freezing here. But the sounds I heard are sounds I hear regularly when out in this back. But something curious came to me. It's squirrels, it's cardinals, blue jays. But then I thought, okay, there are 3 or 4 other bird sounds, and I don't know what they are. And I need to get better at identifying bird sound because I love the sound of them, and it's shameful that I don't know who they are. Yeah. And then, of course, I always find it fascinating when that's juxtaposed with the sound of the passing traffic and the occasional fire alarm, fire engine.
Yes, Mary.
Yeah, I'm actually by the ocean right now. So I could hear waves. What I was trying to do was what could I hear far away from me? And I could hear this really low rumbling. It's sort of it's a very long beach here. So it's kind of all the rocks moving as it hits. It makes a strange, slow rumbling sound.
Yeah.
But when I came closer to myself, I could actually hear my breathing. I could hear myself breathing, and I could also hear my heartbeat. So it was really interesting. It's kind of distance and then coming really close. So it's an interesting experience.
Lindsay.
The other day I was watching something on TV, and the woman who was hosting the show was in an urban garden, and she or she was in Walden Pond. That's right. And she said, when I close my eyes, I can hear the city. And she said it without any judgment or frustration. And I was like, wow, she's in this beautiful green nature spot and she closes her eyes and she's in the city. And she doesn't sound upset. So yesterday when I was outside, I live in the city and my yard is very natural. And I tried listening to that and being okay with the sound of the naval base and all the city stuff. And it was enlightening for me. And today, just now in these 2 minutes, all the sounds seemed familiar. The robin, my husband moving in his chair, his sound coming through his headphones of hip hop music or whatever it was. And I noticed that how I use those sounds as cues for what I'm doing and what's, I don't know how to explain it, but they're just kind of cues for what's next or what, maybe like the clock is. I don't know. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Sometimes I ask my students to listen, and of course I give them a longer time, and sometimes I ask them to draw a map, sound map. And they always find very interesting things. And we found, oh, children could notice everything. They just need more chances, more reminder, right? One of my students also told me about listening to his own breath. He said he was so concentrated on his breath. He tried to find the frequency of the breath, and then he told me, oh, but unfortunately I fell asleep. So yeah, so cute, but they can notice everything. So we can just remind people to listen. And the world is different.
Natasha.
So I'm downstairs, so I couldn't hear the clock. But it was interesting because as I was sitting trying to listen to the sounds around me, it actually became quite uncomfortable because Stan is upstairs, my boys are on the other side of the wall, and I couldn't hear anything. Like I could sort of hear the sound of my foot fidgeting, but it was just really interesting how at that moment the silence was very uncomfortable and very rare. So I actually would have probably welcomed that ticking clock.
Excuse me if I mispronounced your name, or Chao?
Yeah, that was fine. I mean, for me, listening attentively is kind of forcing us to be in the moment, to be present. And this is what's so beautiful about it, because our minds are like monkey brains. They jump from one thing to another and just driving us crazy. And when we really stop and focus to listen carefully, then we have to be here in the moment, and it's so calming. It's just beautiful.
So Natasha said in chat, quiet children are always in trouble. Yes, go to check what they're doing.
Especially if they're Stan's children.
They're creative.
Just saying, just kidding.
I find it very interesting. So Ming-yu, when you were playing that amalgamated piece with the different languages and stuff, it's surprising what can be very soothing versus what can be uncomfortable, right? So we've heard several bits, and Natasha was talking about the silence being odd, or the ticking clock, and Fred's tinnitus, right? Like there's a couple things where the lack of noise seems to be almost just as equally disconcerting for some as too much noise. So for me, I found that mix to actually be very relaxing. I couldn't zero in on one thing, right? Like I couldn't find one person, and I could pick out the Mandarin, I could pick out some different languages within there. That's what caught my ear. But because it was a continuous flow of noise, that was much more soothing than the lack of noise. Does that kind of make sense, right? Like where I could sort of drown out. I couldn't, there was no particular story that I could follow, but within the amalgamation of all of that, I found that to almost wrap around me and be kind of soothing, like a blanket. It had a physical feel to it versus, 2 minutes of silence in my own office was enough to drive me wild. Whereas, and I could listen to hours of that flow, right? Like, I know what I mean, but I'm not sure if I'm making sense, if that makes sense.
Maybe that makes you feel safe. Yeah. Yes, Chira?
Yeah, it's interesting. I heard no noise. I'm in the bottom level of an apartment building. Normally the new neighbor up above, it sounds like a herd of elephants crashing in, but tonight for some reason it's silent. But talking about silence, back when I did my undergrad, I did a course in sound, and in the beginning you asked what favorite sounds were, and I talked about white noise. And when I was a child, white noise could put me to sleep like that. You know, it was just something about it. But so I actually did a sound piece. I went around the city just doing white noise, sounds of white noise, and it was 30 minutes long. And here in Halifax, CKDU, which is the radio station at Dalhousie University, they would play all the sound pieces that came out of that course. So they played a 30-minute piece that I did on white noise, and apparently the radio station received tons of phone calls as to why there was nothing being played, and people didn't realize it was actually this piece. So, and to me, it was kind of almost like I kind of related it to my landscape photography that I do. So different textures and things like that. But yeah, so it was interesting. I don't have those sound pieces anymore. I don't know what I lost the tapes and stuff. So, but yeah.
Goran and then Natasha.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to build on what you were saying, Stan, in response to that wonderful piece. I also found that so engaging, that piece, because first of all, the music was very sort of beautiful and soothing. And at first my imagination kind of like was engaged with the music, but then the sort of listening kind of went more to those voices, and somehow I found it that really engaged the imagination. I found myself kind of traversing across some landscape of memory. I wasn't sure what I was remembering, but it was something very pleasant and kind of beautiful. And it was almost like a journey into some imaginary set of landscapes. And it sort of builds on what Stan was saying and what Michael was talking about. It was just really beautiful and very evocative. And perhaps to your point, Ming-yu, it was somehow not reduced by the fact that I didn't understand those languages, all those languages, but instead it was kind of almost strengthened by that. It was very interesting for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. And actually, when I create that piece, I was very surprised. That was the first time I tried to put the language with the music. And I was so surprised they can so naturally, being one musical piece, become one musical piece. And when you talk about memory, yeah, every sound has a story, has memory. Sound is memory. Those natural sound was from one of my favorite spot in Taiwan, and that was the last time my family, I mean my husband and I and my son got together. That was 2 years ago. And that is very, very sweet memory for me. And that is all those beautiful memories, all in that beautiful sound, in the ocean sound. Yeah, and the wind and the children laughing. Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, I mean, just listening to that, listening to the different noises, it was very engaging because, I mean, I have a hard time kind of sitting still sometimes, but, you know, I wasn't, at no point were you not getting images or thoughts or feelings. And like, it's really interesting because like that, though it has so much meaning to you, and yet as we were sitting listening, it created meaning for us.
Fred?
What you just said had triggered for me with my tinnitus. My hearing aids have got a special program that I can trigger to create the white noise. And the white noise that I thought would be the best one was the ocean sounds. But here I am standing over a putt in the middle of the island of Richmond, trying to concentrate on my putt, and all I'm hearing is the ocean sounds. Or I'm in a Supreme Court in the back row listening to the case that's going on, and because there was only one or two people talking, it got really quiet, and that triggered my ocean sound. So here I am in the middle of a Supreme Court of Canada listening to ocean sounds, and I just couldn't concentrate on what was happening. I found the white noise very difficult. And when I thought about, when you asked about what is the sound that you love the best, it made me think, when I think it was Dan talking, that, oh, what if we went for the ones that we most dislike? What is the discordance? What are the stories behind the discordance that drive us crazy? And for me, sometimes it's just a radio slightly out of tune. The radio static, it gets me tense and uptight, and my emotions are changed by that. And maybe there's other sounds for other people. And I thought that might be an interesting thing to explore.
It's very interesting that we share the sound, but the sound creates different space and memories to everyone, right?
Just the thoughts of that out of tune radio. And this is where, like you said, Ming-yu, and as we know, right, everything we've done all year long has sort of been not only an adventure in creativity and imagination, but we're seeing that there's a lot of emotions that are in there. There's a passion that drives everything, right? So whenever you've presented, both now and before, Ming-yu, I like that you bring that sound element to things, because we often go looking for the visual aspect. We tend to kind of automatically do things, and we take sound sort of for granted a little bit, right? But it's interesting then when you look at the spectrum of what emotions can do. So like that out of tune radio, I share that with Fred. That drives me batty. I have a radio in my garage that can just almost get the station, but not quite. But I can't give up on it, but it's a never ending search to get that fine tune, right? Because not having it done drives me nuts, but I still want the sound, but I'm not enough to give up on it. So it's interesting when our passions start to come into play. So for instance, that water dropping sound that you played, that for me, that drove me nuts. Like I didn't know, my head didn't know what to do with that, right? Like as I listened to that, the sound of one dropping is like the clock ticking. It's monotonous, right? But then you take that and you spatialize it, so it just sounded like it was, if I could put it in a picture, it was like a million little balls bouncing all over the place, but yet I couldn't control what was happening. And because it started so small and got so big, I thought, okay, the small, but by the time there was so much of it, it was like, I don't know what to do with this. My head was firing off in all directions. So it's amazing then as it came back down, the calm returned, right? So it's amazing how where there could be other people here who might have found that like engaging and, you know, energizing. I was going mad, but it's interesting that when our passions get involved, how something as simple as a water droplet multiplying can drive you up or down, right? So this has been a fascinating journey. Jackie.
Thanks, Stan. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for that beautiful exercise. I found myself starting from the outside and then going in. And so I started with the traffic, then came closer with my neighbor, then came closer with my refrigerator humming. Then I heard my stomach grumbling. And then what I found interesting as I heard the languages as well, particularly the Xhosa language, or the Xhosa language, it brought to me this kind of, the best I can think about it is, you know, during the war when you have that tapping, that Morse code kind of, it gave me that kind of rhythm, that Morse code kind of rhythm. And yet there was a syncopation to it that was very mesmerizing at the same time, because I was thinking about how do you understand that? How do you form the understanding of that sound as language? And then I started thinking that, well, we make meaning of everything, so it's how do we then interpret it? And so the emotions was what came to me then. And then the other thing that brought up to me was the vibration that was going through my body with each level of sound. And the other thing that struck me was the repetition of some of the statements. I can't remember what they were now, but each time the repetition occurred, it's almost like it took me to another level of vibration. And as those vibrations increased, I found myself going deeper and deeper inside my body. So it took me a while to get out of it. So it's almost like a meditation, actually. So thank you.
Yes, Peter.
This conversation has triggered an emotional memory, which happened about a year ago, deep into COVID. I was asked to go downtown to MC an event. And the event was this: they were bringing together, it ended up being about 75 musicians. And the reason they came together was to remind people, particularly the education system, of the importance of music, which has been decimated, and particularly decimated through COVID. But actually, that's just an excuse, to be honest with you. So these 7,500 musicians came together outside of City Hall, of course, standing 6 or 8 feet apart, and they played one piece of music. It was Alleluia. And it was one of the most hauntingly beautiful experiences I've had, especially in that context where everybody been inside alone. And so to come out, and I used this earlier when I was talking about the bird sound and the breeze, but as they're playing it, the fire engines are going past. So you have this urban reality going on at the same time as this beautiful rendition of Alleluia. And I don't know how to explain it well. What was it they once asked the famous Canadian dancer? She finished dancing, and Martha Graham, and somebody asked her, well, can you explain what that was? And she said, if I could explain it in words, I wouldn't have had to dance it, would I? But it had a profound impact on me, that one I cannot put in words. It was just beautiful.
Lindsay.
Pardon me. Yeah, you're talking about the emotional context or the stimulation of the sounds. Also reminded me of an experience that was I was gonna boil over, but I was in an audience, and it was an experimental, like in the art gallery of the Greater Victoria, and we were all politely sitting there, and we were supposed to be listening to this piece, and it sounded like, and it went on and on, like 20 minutes of that, and it would come to this like crescendo, like really screechy and loud, and I was furious because I thought that the musician was playing with us, like toying with us, like just like some kind of social experiment to see what we would do. And I was wondering why we weren't getting up and leaving. And I was on the brink of doing that over and over again and talk myself down. But after hearing you talk, Stan, I'm thinking maybe people actually liked it. Like maybe it was just in my head that it was torture just for me, but it really, I don't know who would like it. And the piece that Ming-yu Lin, you did with all these like collage of all these voices and the white noise in the ocean, familiar things, and it all for me went together is very soothing and joyful, and like I didn't think about anything in particular. It was just a very settling physical feeling of kind of settling and just kind of expanding out just gently, not like, oh, but it was a really unique kind of experience and emotional as well. So.
Michael.
I just want to make a comment about the experience all of us here together have had tonight, and for some of you tomorrow morning. Ming-yu, I can't think of a better way to suggest to you the effect you've had on us over the past hour by noticing how our conversations began with the prosaic and became increasingly poetic. Ming-yu, you did this to us. And I think it was a stroke of magic. I didn't see the magic wand you must have had in your hand, but you have transformed us this evening in a way that I think has been more intense than since the last time you led us about a year ago. And I know we're coming to the end here, but I just wanted to make sure that we all took a moment to step back from this experience we're all having together and to realize that we in fact just made some music. Thank you, Ming-yu.
Thank you, Michael. And I want to say every Idea Jam for me is a collaborative musical piece. We work together, all the participants and the host, we work together to make a beautiful piece. So this is our work. Thank you.
Well, and with that, as we are nearing the end, I want to be respectful of the time that we've got. So Ming-yu, do you have any final words to wrap us up?
Oh, just listen carefully to the environment, to the people. And I hope you all enjoy listening with me today. Thank you so much.
That's excellent. And I want to thank you all for your participation this evening. And thank you, Ming-yu, for leading us on this journey into sound. And I believe based on your title, we were all definitely listening tonight for sure. So thank you for that. For everyone else, thank you for joining us for all of our idea jams this last year. Part of our shared mission here is to create that open discussion, enhance our creative thinking, exploring imagination, and having a little time to be able to talk and share our ideas and grow our passions for what we've been hearing. We do look forward each time we meet to our valued time together. So please, please, please keep an eye on your emails over the summer and leading into the fall so we can keep you updated on the 2022-2023 Idea Jams that we will have coming up starting in September. We hope you will join us then, and we look forward to another great year with you. On behalf of all of us here, so steering committee, one more big wave. On behalf of all of us here at the Canadian Network for Imagination and Creativity, we thank you so much for joining us this year. We hope we've expanded your imagination and creativity potentials, as we know you've done that for us. We wish you a great evening, a wonderful and happy and safe summer, and we look forward to seeing you again in the fall. Thank you, everybody, and good night.